Friends, how many of us have them? Ones we can depend on in the movement for Black progress. We are talking about it today with Sharif El-Mekki and David Hardy, our special guest. This is Freedom Friday, and you are still not free. Good morning, friends and fam. It's another Freedom Friday, and you are still not free, but hopefully you are freer after an hour of this show with three fabulous brothers, including myself, but Sharif El-Mekki. Today, our guest will be David Hardy, who is a distinguished senior fellow with the Commonwealth Foundation, but that's not his biggest claim to fame. That's a distinction that people give you after you have done other great things in the world. David has been the co-founder and a retired CEO of Boys Latin of Philadelphia Charter School, which was one of the first single-sex charter schools in Philadelphia that offered classical education, including, and also a large range of rigorous coursework and extensive selection of extracurricular activities, including robotics, drama, entrepreneurship, mock trial, and 10 varsity sports. Damn. You don't see it till you read it, and it's like, well, when can I enroll? I got some kids. I got lots of kids, as a matter of fact. This sounds like the school for us. Too bad we can't send kids from Minnesota to school in Philly to enjoy that type of education. But before we bring David Hardy in, I want to say good morning to Sharif El-Mekki. Thank you for jumping on, brother.
No, my pleasure, man. Great to be here. Happy Friday. Yo, May is almost coming to an end, bro. Like
It's
it's
happening.
crazy. Yeah,
You
yeah.
look like you're in the Matrix. Where are you, brother?
No, I'm at the Hive. One of our funders, Springport Partners, pulled together their fundees, and they've always really approached the work in community. They themselves as philanthropists are always on this learning journey to really look at how does philanthropy uh, work with communities, how do they support communities, but also how does race, class, power, privilege show up in philanthropic circles, and what's the impact? So they've always been just curious and supportive and learners. So just here with some other fundees. So really grateful. And then also yesterday was Malcolm X's birthday.
Wow.
So just
Yeah.
want to shout out to just the legacy that a 39-year-old man has thrust forth in really deep, compelling ways that shapes, informs, teaches, inspires, and keeps us vigilant in so many different ways. So,
Well, I think that's a good segue into the show for today, because Malcolm X is obviously an example of what our show is about today. So today we are talking a little bit about how we hold our friends accountable in the movement for Black progress. This could be in the movement for Chicano progress or the movement for any social aims or goals. It doesn't have to be Black progress specifically, but since we are Black people and we are talking about how we earn our political emancipation, we should talk about what happens in times when we disagree, or in times when the movement doesn't seem to be going the direction we want it to go, and we have to be agitators in the movement. So here's
mhm.
the concept of why I say it relates to Malcolm X. So Malcolm X is deeply at one point in his life, he is deeply committed to the progress of Black people, and at the same time, he's deeply committed to a faith. And he has a spiritual leader in the form of Elijah Muhammad. And at some point, they have a difference of opinion, or a difference of faith in how much they're being faithful to their faith. I'll just put it that way. And Malcolm X has a moment where he has to be a whistleblower of sorts and tell the whole world, I'm going a different direction. We no longer see eye to eye. People don't talk about it much, but in the final days, in the final year of Martin Luther King's life, Dr. Martin Luther King, he was detested and hated by liberals because he had changed. He had a change of heart. He saw a bigger premise for their movement and didn't think that paleo liberals were being true to that faith, right? You could see that story repeat itself out so many times. Even today, you have people within the Bernie wing of the Democratic Party, who are considering themselves whistleblowers on the Manchin Party. There comes a time in any movement where you might have to readjust. No permanent friends, no permanent enemies, only permanent interests, right? But that's an easy thing to say. It sounds like a clever T-shirt, until it's really a friend who does something wrong, right? Like, or does something where you have to really think it through, like Malcolm did. People that you like. Listen, some people are disposable in movements. You don't really care when you lose some of them as friends. But every now and then you have a cousin or family member or somebody who you look over and go, what the hell are you drinking or smoking? Whatever. Right. And I feel like that has happened in the Democratic Party. It's happened in the civil rights movement, many movements for justice. Most recently, I think with the Black Lives Matter movement, it almost always seems to happen. So how do you deal with it? It's the Houdini question. Friends, how many of us have them? Ones we can depend on. And I want to bring in David Hardy because, David, you are smart on these issues. You have found a way to navigate differences of opinion to achieve what we're all trying to achieve in education, which is for us to have self-determination, for us to have school choice, for us to have have the power to determine the who, what, when, where, and how of education. But it creates strange bedfellows, and at times that seems to fray to a point where it's almost, for me, irreversible. So good morning, David. Thank you for joining us, brother. Appreciate you. That was the big setup.
Okay. Glad to be here.
So far, what do you think? I mean, with that framing.
So, I look at this. I've been struggling with this with a lot of my friends because this couldn't have happened at a worse time. We're fighting a revenue stream that's aimed against us and aimed against our children, and that revenue stream is the money that can come from the teachers union, and they have been the biggest obstacle, in my opinion, to us working out better educational arrangements for our children in their schools and in schools that we run, that we operate. And the whole idea of parent choice, of parent having the agency to say, I want my child in this school or that school. That's been our biggest obstacle. And that hasn't gone away, but a real disagreement has come up. And a lot of people jumped on this early when they saw when the idea of critical race theory came up, which is nothing new. I mean, it's been around for a long, long time. But somehow it got into the lexicon of what we do. And all of a sudden, there were people who were absolutely against it. And I'm not even sure they knew what it was, where it was being taught, or any of that. And then it became a thing where people went out to find their proof. And, quite frankly, I don't know what that proof was, whether it was legitimate or not. But the fact of the matter is they called it proof and they acted like it was proof. And all of a sudden we got like this big range war going on between people who, a year ago were fighting for the same thing. Now, I don't think that we stopped believing in the same thing, but we certainly have this wedge in here. And, I hear you say you don't know if you can get over it. I've heard that from other people, and I hear it from the other side. And the fact of the matter is, we got to get over it, or else we're lesser in the work that we do. Now, I think that one of the ways you get over it is people need to start trying to talk about it. And I don't see a whole lot of real communication in that part. And I'm not blaming either side. I'm just saying I don't see it. And I think that really needs to happen. And it needs to happen soon. Or else, this wedge is going to become, a giant gaping valley and we'll never get together again. And the loser on that is going to be children, and I really do believe that.
Do you how do you consider what's a line in the sand? Like, we can all get along and share a common agenda, but there are lines at some point.
Hmm.
It took me years to find one, right, in this movement, because I'm down for choice and down for self-determination. But how do you think of your personal line? There is a line you won't cross.
I won't cross a line that's going to hurt our children. I won't cross a line that's going to hurt our children and hurt the whole process of getting more options and more opportunity for our children. That really, to me, seems like what we need to be doing. Anybody gets in the way of that, that's where we have a problem.
Sharif, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think, for me, a big part of it is, where, how anti-Black are they? Like I'm even thinking, I read, and I forget the guy's name. Mr. Hardy, you probably know this guy just won the Republican primary. And, like he's for charters, but he's also anti-CRT. He wants to kind of purge all the voters and make everybody kind of apply to voting. Like he has to like all this kind of crazy stuff. So for me, it's, and of course, a lot of that is so targeted towards Black and brown, communities.
Yeah. Well, I mean, look, just saying you're for school choice doesn't mean you can take me out to dinner. I mean, that's not.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Oh, okay, you for school choice? That's good. I'm not waiting for that.
100%. There's a whole lot of people that I actually detest their policies, and they breathe oxygen too. So go figure, right? Like it's something.
Yeah.
It's like, oh yeah, we all need the sun, we all need air. They probably debate on what's clean air and what's just regular air. But some of these folks are have such a level of anti-Blackness, and we know people who've been vehemently anti-Black have also opened up Black schools. If we trace back the history, right? Like they've opened up schools for Black people and been vehemently, violently anti-Black simultaneously.
Mm-hmm.
So to me, that's part of like the the context that we're like working and operating and trying to again, exercise self-determination for our people and recognizing here are all the things that we have to swim against, the current we have to swim against. So,
well, I'll say something provocative because that's how these conversations roll and go. As one does.
Well, you got Hardy's here too, so he's like, "Oh yeah, well, hold my beer. Watch this."
That's true. That's true. So school choice is made up of some camps that aren't all one camp, and when people talk about them as a monolith, I think that they don't know what they're talking about. That usually to me sounds like outside people when you don't understand who the actors and players are. So there's a portion of school choice I think are just about all school choice. Charters, district, private schools, ESAs, or whatnot. You got kind of like universal school choice soldiers.
But wait a minute.
Go ahead.
Nobody's that. There is nobody like that.
No, I am. I'm literally for all the forms of school.
You are, but anybody. That's because you're not in one of those camps. You're outside the camp. Like right now, I'm outside the camp. I can do that. When I worked at a charter school, I was pro-charter first, and then I was pro-school choice. And I think that people really operate on it.
I don't think the public knows that when they say school choice or they hear school choice movement. I don't think that they know that charter people, not everybody's universal soldier. Not everybody believes in all forms of choice, and there is some bickering and some backbiting amongst choice people. Right?
It's survival. It's how you survive. And the thing about it is,
he's going all the way survival.
No, I'm serious, man. Because what happens is that you read what people say, and they throw everything in the pot at the same time. I saw this guy posting about Christian charter schools. There are no Christian charter schools, But
there's about to be though. There's gonna be.
What'd you say?
There's about to be. So
there will be.
Oh yeah, have you seen the plan in Tennessee?
Oh, I didn't see that.
Yeah, so
I
the
didn't see
governor of Tennessee has signed a deal with Hillsdale College
that.
to open 50 Christian charter schools in Tennessee. Um, and this is going to be a test. I mean, there's a Supreme Court case right now that I think people are relying on that are going to make it much easier to be able to do this. But even without that, they are figuring out a way to have 50 Christian charter schools in Tennessee. And
Well,
that's causing some confusion.
that is confusing because look, here's what I would say. You want to do that? Start a voucher program. Do it.
Yeah, and they
I'm
have
not
one.
against you doing it. If you got a voucher program, why don't you use that? Yeah. That
So here's my
Okay, go ahead.
provocative statement.
I jumped in. I shouldn't
Yeah.
have. I'm sorry.
No. That's the way we do it here. So jump in.
Okay, all right.
Here's my provocative statement.
Okay.
There are different camps within the school choice movement. The private school choice movement is one of those camps. And within the private school choice movement, the group that is winning is the group that wants a monopartisan, monoracial, white women, suburban movement to win midterm elections and get vouchers passed through. And they have like 3 to 4 foundations have determined that's the best strategy for private school choice to win. Dump the Democrats, dump bipartisanship, dump social justice, school choicers, and go hard on the culture war stuff. And that is the group, to me, in school choice that is winning when it comes in terms of who's leading in strategy, who's actually advancing, getting the money. And so everybody else who's in the school choice movement, they're fine people, very fine people on all sides. But the group that's winning is the group that is pushing this culture war. Let's hit them where it hurts. Let's go after trans kids and social justice and all that stuff. If that is the face of private school choice, I, for the first time, am saying that I believe that the teachers' unions are a far better partner than that group of school choice people who are winning are. And if I say that, that's a pretty profound statement for me to make. That tells you just
That
how
is pretty
destructive.
profound.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because the teachers' unions do a lot of things, but they're not passing laws that fire people for teaching Ruby Bridges. They're not passing laws that remove Black books and authors and texts from schools and classrooms and libraries. They're not making Black history illegal and outlawing Black thought. And without even a discussion or a debate of whether or not you should have Ta-Nehisi Coates in your school or not, right? No need for debate. Let's just go straight to the state. Let's pass a law. And let's act like that people don't even have a say in the matter. That is a level of white supremacist activity and white power that I do not put on any other group, including the teachers' unions. So what say you? That's my provocative statement. I will dump the school choice people who see that as the strategy before I'll dump unions.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm not going to stop dumping unions, but to talk about these people, because I want to tell you something. It cracks me up that they come out in support of a critical race analysis of history because they would not survive that. They could not survive that. Okay, a critical analysis of race and the teachers union. Come on. So just to put them on the side. Put them on the side.
Stay there for a second. Tell people what you mean, like, by that history. Like, if they did have to do that, because I think this is interesting. If they did have to survive one of those analyses, what would they have to contend with?
Well, they would have to contend with their original thought in educating Black people in the 50s was, we need the teacher to be able to expel kids right out of class. Okay, we need to get them right out of class. Not, especially these Black boys, because they're nothing but a problem. So we don't need an expulsion process. Let the teacher make that decision. Fortunately, that did not fly, but that was their first thing. So then, as they organized in the 60s in New York, and I know you and Sharif are well aware of this. In New York, they tried to have a Black. Well, first of all, they did a lot of things to gain more power over public education. Like one of the things that the teachers union did in New York was they became the sole collector of teacher union dues. So they had a black teachers union in New York until the middle part of the 60s in New York, which they collected dues from their members and they did what teachers unions do. Well, the AFT made themselves the only collector of union dues with their political power. And so, that kind of strangled the black teachers union away. And that also took away independent black thought about public schools and public school teaching. Okay, then the next thing was Mayor Lindsay wanted to give power to the community in Brownsville, Ocean Hill, so he let them take over their school district. He had a parent-led school board, and they hired a school leader. And when they decided there were some teachers there that they didn't think were in the same mind that they were on the mission of the school, they asked that they be transferred back to central administration, as was the process back then, to be reassigned to another school. The teachers union came and called them a bunch of racists, and they said that they were fired. They weren't fired, and they brought in Bayard Rustin. They brought their civil rights person in to march with them, and then they closed down all 5 boroughs when this was a dispute about one little sub-district. Okay, and what that did was it showed America the power of teachers, and they can close down your school district. And just from this pandemic, that wasn't the teachers, just the pandemic. Closing down schools is a horrible thing because it affects a lot of stuff, especially the education of the students, but also the whole process of parents going to work. A lot of things go on because kids are in school. And so that kind of weaponization of education and using it against pretty much black people has been part and parcel of the teachers union since the 50s.
Okay.
So
let's just say on this show, we agree
mhm,
with you 100%.
mhm,
You have just stated, so we cover this. So my friends in the teachers union know this about me. These are the things I have called them on over time.
mhm.
Like, yes, you do a lot for giving the appearance of social justice or participating in our movements in different ways, but you have this history. First of all, uh, Ocean Hill was our Alamo in Black education. That was the
Yes,
Alamo, and
yes.
we should look at it that way.
Hmm.
We were crushed. Our visions, hopes, and dreams about self-determination and education were crushed by the father of modern teacher unionism. That's how
Hmm.
he became famous. And
Yep.
after he did it, Al Shanker, by the way, he traveled the country telling other communities not to let Black radicals take over their school district
There
and
you
how
go.
to fight them and beat them. And they have never, we have never had reparations for that crushing of the Black dream in New York, and we've never had an apology. I think we need both. I think we need Black reparations in education, not just in the country, but in education. And I think we need an apology from the AFT on behalf of Al Shanker, the father of modern teacher unionism, before we give them a free pass. However, okay, so we all agree on that. I just wanted to say, I agree with you on that. But now in 2022, I can trust them more actually on policies related to things that I think are very material and germane, like voting rights, the right to be, the right to, if I had to think about the agenda of their cohort, because they're not, realize the teachers union is not part of, they don't stand alone. They're part of a bigger agenda and a bigger cohort. They don't do just education. It matters. Our economics, Black economics matter right now. Black voting matters. Black power in the electoral system right now. And all this energy,
Yes.
David, I see
Yes.
you biting it.
I'm waiting.
But I just want
I'm
to say,
waiting.
all this energy that we have for
Mr.
them,
Hardy is like, hold, wait a
Hardy is,
minute.
we have this perpetual
I told you,
energy
he's
for
like, hold
them.
my beer. It's too
So,
early,
so,
bro.
so here's
It's too
the thing is, we're not going to disagree on them.
early.
We have all
No.
this energy. We have all this energy for them, but we have zero energy for the people who believe in school choice, who are literally actively trying to finance the disenfranchisement of our people from the political system.
Mhm.
And we know their names, we know who they are, we know where they live, we know where their foundation money is.
Number one, like I said before, the revenue stream. They have done a masterful job in intertwining that revenue stream into a lot of social justice causes, and give them credit for that. They started with the NAACP, but they got the revenue to do it. Okay, so what happens when our children get into something, or when we get into something about school choice or self determination or things like that, they can come to you and say, "Yeah, well, that's not good." But look at all this stuff we're doing over here. That'll go away if we don't have our revenue stream. And our children's education always gets negotiated away. And I'm going to give you a really good example of that. We had a bill in here in Pennsylvania that would take a portion of the total the state portion of the school funding and allow you to take that and go to a private school. And it was like $6,700. Philadelphia is about 18,000 a kid. 6,700 of that would have been allowed to go to the private school. They got they got one Democratic vote, and then that guy, they turned the guns on him, and he barely got reelected this time. They spent a lot of money and a lot of time trying to crush him.
Who was that?
Almond Brown.
Okay.
Oh, they tried to get him good, man. They had everybody. They had people from the PFT, from the Philadelphia Federation of Teachers, getting emails every day saying, if you live in this district, vote against them. If you have family, call them up and vote against them. They really went on a mission to crush this guy for doing this. Now, this is a guy who, in his district, he has like 10 or 12 charter schools. And the people in his district want school choice, and they want other options. So he was basically voting his district. And I don't look. I can see people being against this. I don't have a problem with you being against this. There's reasons to be against this. If you consider, if you want the public schools district to get all the money and you think this is taking it away, I can see you wanting to fight that argument. I don't think it's a winning argument, but you have the right to fight that argument. But there was no debate on this thing. There was nobody who said, I hate this bill because it's going to hurt the kids, because they didn't really want to go on the record as saying that. And there was nobody who wanted to go on the record as saying, you know what, I think there's things that are attractive about this bill, but I'm not going to vote on it, vote for it. But I think the school district needs to kind of see that our children need other out. There was no debate. Shut up, silence. That's the power they have. And so, I mean, when we can't even talk about it, because we can't, then, I don't see running back to them because somebody over here said something I didn't like. I'm going to say, I didn't like that, and I'm going to deal with them. I'm not going to go running back to somebody I know hates me. I'm not. Ooh, I lost you some. I lost your volume. Oh, okay. There
Okay. I want to make two observations quickly, and Sharif, I want you to come in on this too. So the first one is, you just kind of gave an example of what I'm talking about, David, my friend, my brother, which is, I already said we agree on a lot about the union politics. But what we can't do is address what people in right-wing, white nationalist school choice foundations are doing right now. It's almost as if there's a law against being able to do it. We have to, in those moments that comes up, we have to shift to how bad the teachers union is. So we can't talk honestly about the fact that there are literally people trying to take the black vote away. They're literally dropping into states, talking to governors behind closed doors, working out backroom deals to disenfranchise black people from the vote. I mean, if our answer is always going to be to those things, but the union, yes, but the union, then we're not very useful to our people. So that's one observation that I have is, okay, we've already agreed that the union does some things that has a history and a track record of doing some things, but this is a specific other thing that needs accountability. Like if the union is the constant boogeyman that prevents us from ever telling the truth about other people who are trying to hurt us in other ways, then that's the real conversation we can't have. We can't have that conversation. We can talk about the union all day and everybody's going to shake their head and agree with us. And so just the second part of that, I'll say, is the union is not all bad either, though. As much as we can point out all these things about them, a lot of our people are in these unions and they have disagreements for different ways, and they are taking care of our kids every day. This is one of the interesting things about the collapse of the conservative argument on education for me. I never saw so many conservatives until the pandemic. I never saw so many conservatives say how essential it was for kids to be in public schools every day. Right. Even this argument that like, oh my God, they kept the schools closed. It was the hopes and dreams of closing the schools for years and years and years on the conservative side until the goddamn pandemic. And now everybody's like, oh my God, schools are essential. Public schools are essential. Oh my God, they lost so much learning. Listen to this argument. Listen how this argument backfires. Because I used to, at the beginning of the pandemic, I challenged people from saying this all the time. Like, oh my God, we got to keep the schools open, get the kids back into school, blah, 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 blah. Suddenly, public schools became the greatest social good ever. And now people are passing around studies saying they've lost 50% of their learning because they were out of school, blah, blah, blah. Oh, so now conservatives are making the argument that kids actually learn in public schools. That actually, when you shut down public schools and you take kids out of the public schools, oh my God, what an achievement catastrophe that is. Why? Well, I guess apparently something we didn't know for 50 years. I guess that they are learning something in these schools and there is a need for them to be open. And oh, by the way, when they did shut down, I love the reformers and education people on the side, say, oh, the teachers union kept schools closed and it was, caused all this catastrophe. What did you offer while those schools were closed? This $100 million school reform movement that was for 25 to 50 years said, we have the answer. We have schools and we have policy things and blah, 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 blah. And if only there was a national Katrina, we could make all of America like New Orleans in a heartbeat, blah, blah, blah. Man, that pandemic came, them schools closed and everybody's like, you got to get the schools back open again. Well, wait a second. I thought y'all was the solutions people, the ideas people, the choice, the options, the innovation. What happened to all? See, I feel like we're letting conservatives off the hook for the collapse of their argument in many ways. But the union, actually, with this argument, what you're blaming the union for, not you, David, but what writ large, what reformers blaming the teachers union for is their own the failures of their own reform ideas. Because they had nothing to offer. So they're like, you're the only game in town. You got to get these schools back open again. You got to get these kids back into school. I'm talking for myself personally. Mm-hmm. Before everything shut down, I probably would have never said it would be a problem shutting all these kids down and moving the kids out of those schools and moving them. Like I literally had said at one point, you probably would do, but these schools are so bad with achievement that you'd probably do better if you sent every kid home and give them an iPad and tell them have at it. I said that. I wrote that in things like.
So did I.
I wrote that.
And you know what?
Closed, and now everybody's like, "Oh my God, the schools are closed." It's terrible.
Well, you know what? We were right about some kids because there's some kids who stayed home and stood on that laptop and said, "Well, hey, I don't got this teacher in front of me. Let me have at it." There were some. Now, wasn't a lot. I'll give you that. Wasn't a lot, but there were some kids who felt that way. But the thing is that 10 years, 12 years ago, I used to tell my friends in the charter movement, you guys better tighten this thing up. We can't go around just saying we're better than the public schools because at some point these guys have the resources, they have the talent to kind of figure it out. And then we'll have some serious competition and you won't even have the resources to compete with them. And over the past 10 years, I've seen opportunities for them to do that. And they never did it. Okay? And so, I mean, look.
I mean, this is never in some cases, though, right? I mean,
say that again. Say that again.
They haven't had to in some ways because the emergence of the charter schools that were just going to outdo them and be so much better than them remain so small. Right. Like the original hope, my original hope in charters was that you were going to see a widespread movement of better schools than the district schools. And what you got in some cases was that. And in some cases, in a much bigger case, almost the same. and then in some cases worse, right? Like, so
And in
my
my
original,
naive,
We were in West Philly. We were in West Philly.
yeah,
Everybody
yeah,
knew us, you
yeah,
know.
yeah.
And let me tell you something. Sharif was there before me. He had, you know, he had the high school thing going before my school did. So when I went out there, I looked to see who was sending the most kids to college in West Philly, and that was by a long shot, Sharif. I mean, a long shot,
Sharif, wow.
right?
All right, Sharif.
Okay, all right. And the deal with Sharif is that they had two selective admissions high schools out there. Sharif was killing them, and then they had a couple of what they call citywide. There's a little less of a selection criteria, but there is selection criteria nevertheless.
Those are
It
magnets.
was, they're
it's like a,
a
another
step
tier.
down, yeah, step down from Magnus. So,
Hmm.
but all those schools today are in the bottom 15% of schools in Pennsylvania. Even our magnet schools, our selective schools, the bottom 15%. Okay, um, when you go to Sharif School, you see everybody there on the same page. You know, everybody's there for the same. The kids are there, the teachers are there, the administration's there, and the guy driving that was the leader, saying, "Look, this is what we got to do. This is our mission." And he goes around and make. You remember the guy on Ed Sullivan used to have all the plates going. You know, he's the guy going around staking the sticks, making those all the plates spinning. He's the guy doing that, and that's what you do when you run a school. You don't find people like that. You
Well,
know,
you
I
do
mean,
find him. You
it.
find Sharif and the others that
Well,
we
no,
know.
no, 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 no. What I'm saying is, why you don't find them is because the system's set up. He couldn't do that when he was a public school teacher, a public school principal. He wasn't allowed to do that. He had to do that. He had to be a renegade to do that. He had to get all kinds of grief to do that. And there'd be people aiming the gun trying to get rid of him for doing that, not
I feel
praising
like
him.
we're and Sharif, I want to bring you on this. I feel
Yeah.
like we're doing the same thing though. We will agree on how that part of the system works and functions. There is another system at play in our world that
That's
is
not our system, though. That's
that,
not our system. Our system is liberation, getting
okay.
our own resources, getting our own way to run schools. That's what our system is.
That's one of our systems, and we actively though, like if we're talking about black liberation is in large part education, but it's also in other parts power, political power, amassed over time.
Mm.
And while we have one group of people we have to fight to make sure that we have the total amount of power to determine for ourselves what is education, because that's really what's at play. We get to determine who
The
leads the
purpose of
schools,
it.
who
Yeah.
writes the curriculum, who has the contracts, who stands before our kids, how did they get there, how were they trained, how are they monitored and tested and evaluated and let go when they need to be. Those are all things that if they're within our control, suddenly we have black educational capital to win. That's the way. At the same time, we never had a black education movement that was divorced from our political movement, meaning our gaining and obtaining, or our gaining and sustaining of political rights within the system. So if the very people who are coming to you saying, I have a ticket for you, literally in the form of a voucher, are also saying, but I want to take from you your rights at the polls, or in other ways, we have to be able to sustain a conversation about that without jumping back to how bad the system is, because we already agree on how bad the education system is. We agree on that
Okay,
already.
okay, but like you said, and I agree that I may be guilty of this, of referring to people on the union people as a monolith. The other side is not a monolith either. And I think that, like I said, we got to figure out who can talk to people, who we can talk to, and have those conversations. And that's not going to be with everybody, and I understand that, believe me. But the fact is that there are people on the union. There are people. Look, when I opened up Boys That, and one of my biggest sources of support came from my friends who were Philadelphia public school teachers who said, "We need this." They were black public school teachers and said, "Hey, you got to do this. I don't care what they say, go do it, and I'm for you." Okay, I ain't gonna say it'll work, I understood that. You got to keep your job. But they were for me. And I understood what they did. Um, we got to give those people a chance to talk. And same thing on the other side. We can't have, if the
You
school
don't think I
choice
set
movement,
it up this way though? You don't think I set it up by saying the school choice movement is not a monolith? You have all these different camps. And I have identified through Black analysis one of the camps that is actually incredibly dangerous and problematic for us as concerns our political rights. In school choice movement, you have people that are just ESAs or universal vouchers or vouchers just means tested or just vouchers for specific student groups like special education or just public school choice, meaning, magnets and
Mhm.
charters. Or you have charter people who've thrown private school choice people under the bus for years.
Yep.
In the private school choice movement, you have secular and non-secular, you have, and parochial, for instance, and those are camps that don't always live together. So I have been clear about the fact that this isn't some wild accusation of not knowing what part of the school choice movement is a problem. This is deep and meaningful analysis to people who aren't on the inside, who do think it's a monolith. It's not a monolith. I'm not part of that wing of school choice, and I want the public to know that. I want you to know that I agree with school choice. I disagree with taking away your civil rights.
Well, then
Yeah.
here's what I always say: name names.
Yeah.
You know who they are. Say who
Why?
they are. Okay.
Well, I mean, I
I
think,
mean,
and I think a
you
really
know.
important.
Go ahead.
Sorry.
Go
Yeah,
ahead.
I was going to say a really important piece about this, I think, is, and you both mentioned it, but this idea of not separating politics from education, and I think that's extremely dangerous. And I think a lot of people, even though they may not say it directly, they're trying to do it, and that's the same thing of like offering you a flower and, a poisonous flower, right? Like, and that's what some of this stuff represents. Like, hey, we're going to fight for choice. Here's a voucher. I'm actually for ways to find avenues for more independent Black schools. And it's very different reasons, very different rationale, very different mindset, very different genesis than some of the folks who want other types of private schools. So for me, an independent Black private school is deeply saturated in the politics of Black liberation. There are folks who might say like, oh, yeah, we'll support independent Black schools, but for this other political agenda that is severely anti-Black and comes with a whole lot of other shackles that's going to tie, communities down, particularly around in that voting sphere. Like if they're trying to restrict and say, oh yeah, and open up more independent Black, what am I actually educating Black children for then? Like, what's the purpose of education? Goes back to that question that you asked, Chris. It's like understanding that there are so many people with different ideas of what the purpose of education is for. If we understand and we start from there, then that's when we can kind of have a better view of the landscape. I think too many people are naively believe that everybody thinks education is kind of the same thing. Oh, we just want to do this or a better society. Like, better society for who? And better which society? Because you can oppress me and still think you're improving society, right? Because you're putting me in this subservient position to always be, in servitude of you with little political rights, but your society, your enclosed, privileged society, actually improves in your mindset for you and your progeny. Totally divorced from the rest of the country, and then I think those are the two, the avenues. And I agree. Listen, I've had multiple, issues with teachers unions, which are majority white, and some hijack Black people and brown people, and also recognize that even within unions, there are also political battles, right? You see within unions, there are caucuses who are saying like, no, we need to actually be more vocal, and they often lose because of the power structure, the bureaucracy, the power, as well as the white power structure that may support the status quo also exists. And I've told you, and I've not had time to really research this, but I brought this up multiple times on our various shows, that I've been told by multiple people, and I'm really interested in seeing if Kamika Royal addresses this in her book, but that when they were trying to get more Black teachers, the Black men, concerned Black men, I was told the Philadelphia Teachers Union took them to court and said, "Hey, school district, this is racist. You can't recruit black men." Right. And now you hear them saying, "We need more diversity." Right. And so like, wait a minute, y'all the same.
Crocodile tears.
And some of y'all are in the same positions, right? Like it's not like it was like this whole shift in new people. Some of those folks are, it's like when Rizzo left the police department. Do we think his influence just ended? You know, did Shanker's influence just end on the union, or did it his leg? We started the show talking about Malcolm's legacy and how it endures. Well, we think like Shanker's legacy didn't endure in the teachers union. We think that Rizzo's legacy didn't endure in the Philadelphia Police Department. Let's imagine when Rizzo was the captain of the police department or whatever. What were the new recruits? How old were they? And what positions of power are they in now, decades later?
Yeah.
Y'all keep doing it. Y'all keep doing it. See, y'all just keep
No, but wait a minute.
Y'all keep doing
I'm
it.
just no.
I want to go back to something else. I want to go back to something
Y'all
else.
y'all can't stick with the issue.
I'm saying
you
everything.
can't have the conversation. See?
No. I'm talking about just legacies in general. No, I agree with you as far as like, you know, anybody that's talking about choice and want to restrict power, political and otherwise, they're not really about choice. They have a different type of agenda. You know,
right.
And
a
I think our third way,
you know, a dangerous one that we're not. So first of all, we have school choice people who pass laws that say you can hit protesters with your cars now. You can't film the police. And even in private schools that get public money, you can't teach CRT. You can't teach divisive concepts, even in school choice schools, AKA voucher schools. So it's no longer just about school choice and universal school choice. It's still about kind of bleaching history and outlawing your right. When you said Black independent schools earlier or whatnot, you have under some of these state laws, you will have school choice and the ability to start a school, but you won't be able to have the Afrocentric school that you're talking about.
That's
okay. Well, that's not a school choice person. That's not a school choice. No, that is not a school choice person.
Literally a school choice person. That's like the leaders. Those are the leading governors in some cases of the school choice movement. So
name names, because the fact of the matter is, if that's your belief, that's not a school choice person. School choice people want people to have freedom for choice. That's that.
Except for in the choiciest market in the United States, which is Florida, who is run by a governor who might be president one day, who is doing two things at once. He's being the biggest champion in the country as a governor for school choice in the state that has the most school choice of any state in the country. And you can see in a school choice market, the kingdom of school choice in the United States, you still can pass anti-Black laws to go along with it.
Oh,
so when you say name names, let's keep naming names. There's, you know, Texas, Florida, the organizations that support this movement, Christopher Rufo, the Manhattan Institute, the Heritage Foundation, AEI to a large extent, everybody who's trading in this anti-Black, anti-CRT, anti-investigation of American history, not as a argument, but as a law. See, there's different when people want to argue, because we can all argue about that. I love that.
Yeah.
Argue about it. But when you pass laws, now you're trying to change the structures that actually win the argument for you. So I can't even have a voice in it. And now we don't have a movement anymore. Yeah. I can't come to your luncheon. I can't be on your panel. I can't sit next to the dude who's nationally trying to gin up hatred for my people through laws and structures, right? See, it's all fun and games until you start passing laws, right? The teachers union isn't passing laws right now that restrict some things that I think are really important, like my vote, my right to film the police, my right to be safe at a protest, my right to be able to teach what I want to teach in my schools, and especially around things like Black history and ethnic studies and all that type of stuff, right? So while we can share, go ahead, Sharif. I mean, we could share, what we want to say about teachers unions, but we can't sustain this other conversation for some reason.
No, I think the other conversation can and must be sustained. I think this is where I was going with this idea of like, what's the purpose of education? If my purpose of education, along with parental choice and all these kind of things, are avenues for Black liberation, which means an ending to white supremacy, and that there are other people who want school choice to further white supremacy, to indoctrinate in white supremacy, and to solidify white supremacy within the guise of different types of school. Those are just different mechanisms, right? And every couple of months, I retweet, Nellie Fuller's Jr. statement about like if you don't understand racism and white supremacy, what it is, how it works, everything else you think you understand will only confuse you. And that is
I thought that was
directly.
Dr. Francis Wilson.
Well, no, I think she got it from my understanding. She may have, that
Interpolated.
yeah, like
Okay.
yeah. I
All
mean,
right.
but she's also, yeah. I mean, she also
That's
has
the
very
first. That's
similar.
who I heard that from. That's who
Yeah,
I heard it from. Is
but
just what I'm saying.
but
Yeah.
I think originally, Nelly kind of coined it. But the philosophy
Okay.
isn't new, right? Like it's a, it's been a very consistent strain. We talked about Malcolm. Like Malcolm very clearly, directed some of the Black rage in the communities to amplify this and point out, if you don't understand, you think that Fox is your friend. Let me explain to you how white supremacy works, right? This is why they're the two wings of the same bird. All these things, I think it's not yes, Nellie Fuller, yes, Westling, and yes to everybody else that's been pushing towards Black liberation and pointing out when people are coming to you, with this idea of friendship, right? Like that's how, and treaties and compromises. This is how your land gets taken. This is how genocide happens. This is how your schools are shut down. And this is how they bar you from teaching about white supremacy versus Black liberation. Chris, I think the third piece is like, how do we exercise self-determination in the midst? Because this is the water that we're in. This is the water
It's
that we're in, and how do we navigate this with this third idea of our children, our communities? And can we believe if we have Black liberation, just like we saw in all of the patterns of history in this country, Black liberation actually improves overall country outcomes
For everybody else.
right? For
I
everybody,
get that.
every single time.
Yeah,
Where white
right.
But how do you
supremacy
judge that?
damages everybody else,
Yeah. But how do you measure that? You measure that in economics, okay? Because you have more people who are able to earn a living, who be able to live in comfort, who are able to support their families. This whole idea of education is something other than we need economic outcomes to prove that education was beneficial to us.
Mr. Hardy, I would say I would add a wrinkle to that because I think kind of social uplift or economic uplift by itself ain't enough, right? Like I think
Okay.
you know what I mean? Like you can have like they'll say like, oh yeah, you'll be reading better as
Thank you.
I totally erase you and make you feel so, like just eviscerate you as a human being, but you'll be able to read this document, right? And so
Mhm.
I think it has
Or
to
you'll
go
be able to get a
beyond.
good job,
Yeah,
or
right. Like
something
matter of
like
fact,
that.
because some of them
Yeah,
for the good job, it means only working for me. Don't
Yeah.
think independently. Don't create jobs. Don't start something that's only, hey, you work for me and I will, right? Like, and so I would just say like the community uplift and the community organization and the community power has to also be part, not
Right.
just the economic on the
Right.
dashboard type of thing.
I think, like nationally speaking, what you just said, Sharif, in terms of many of the rights that Americans enjoy come from the Black struggle. You wouldn't have them if you didn't. The openness of this society to many of the rights that we have is because there was such thing as an African American, like or an
I
African
remind our
in
Muslim
American right
immigrants that all the time. Like, sometimes
immigrants.
they come like straight ignorant about who laid the, path. That's Iranian friends who actually like spending a significant amount of time. They took them to Alabama. Like listen, all the things that you say that you want as a Muslim immigrant, let me show you how you even got to this point to even
As a
have a
Muslim
platform
immigrant,
to address.
as another immigrant, as a white woman, as a gay family, as like a family, all of the basis of those rights come from case law that revolved around African Americans attempting to make America right when it came to its values. Like, we were the constant, we were the color of a lie. We were the lie. We were America's lie. America would say all these great things about itself, and we were the one to say, ah, ha, 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 ha.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, not in my case. All men are created equal. Really now? Tell me more about this. This sounds interesting as a concept. All that came from us. If we are not good guardians of all the amendments that we got passed, all of the laws and all the freedoms that we enforced on America against its will. If
Against
we
its
are not
will.
good against its
They
will, if we are
detested
not,
this, what we were
so we
saying.
are the Black consciousness of a nation that needs one. And if we aren't good gardeners and good tenders to that garden of rights and structurally constructed rights, you know, like by law, by rule, by force of the government, then shame on us. And what I'm saying to you is, because we are school choice people, we are having lunch with people that are actively trying to make us bad gardeners. They are actively trying to sell us, because every person, every opponent that we had for each of those amendments and rights that we were trying to get passed, they were offering us something, but it was too little. So in every case, it wasn't like they were just fighting us. They were saying, no, instead of total freedom, how about we offer you some other part-time freedom? That is my analogy for what is happening with vouchers right now for some segment of the voucher crowd.
I
Not
wouldn't.
everybody.
Yeah, not everybody, but
Not everybody.
what I say is and this is my little controversial statement.
Uh-oh, here we go.
Well,
What I'm
this
rooting
is the
for,
platform for it. Go lean in.
yeah, what I'm rooting for is a total monetization of public education, so that it's about dollars. This is the dollars you get. This is the dollars you have to work with, and let the parents be responsible for the outcomes, because they get the blame already. So let them be able to kind of navigate this thing. I have a lot of faith in black and brown parents, because I've seen them in Philadelphia figure stuff out where there wasn't a whole lot of choices. They still figured out what was the best choice for their child, and they made it happen. And I think that's a community education that will happen. But I don't think that having somebody else responsible for where your child goes to school is not it's not a good deal for anybody. And I think that only having one source of education is not a good deal for anybody. So I'd like to see this thing become more of a, this is what you get. This is what education is. This is our education dollar for you. And it doesn't have to be equal. In fact, it should never be equal because it should have
Mhm.
uh, uh, more resources
Yeah.
for those who need it. Yeah, it needs to be weighted. But the
Yeah.
fact is, you put money, you put power in people's hands, and all that other stuff of we're going to reduce the selective admissions requirements or get more black kids in, that never happens, or we're going to have vouchers to let people in these really expensive private schools. That's never going to go up more than to a certain percentage. So there has to be a public pot of public money and a way for the general public to get educated. And I think that we need those dollars in our hands to be able to control that more.
And we're running up on time. Sharif, what's your final word on this big, illustrious conversation here?
Yeah, I mean,
Dave Hardy just threw something out there that I think could be a whole nother show. The monetization part of this education needs to be like it.
Yeah. I would say part of it is I hope, and just continue to advocate that this idea of that it's not just public school. Because we talked about this, a couple years ago, about this idea of public education and like how all of it, and we're talking about like racial justice. It means like the public education and the systems, right? Like you're a big fan of libraries. I'm a big fan of libraries, and we also have to acknowledge like libraries in communities of color are often just as underfunded as the schools in those same communities. And then the rec centers that are in those same communities. And like it just goes on and on and on.
Yeah.
And so if we actually look at what's the ecosystem that children and communities learn in, and those ecosystems that learn from those same communities, like what would that look like if we really pushed in? And on the other side, like, listen, there are a whole lot of folks who are trying to poison us, and beguile us in different ways and specific things they're finding. And it's kind of, like it's brilliant and devilish and evil genius all at the same time. They take a little bit of it's how the devil infiltrates your thing, right? They take a little bit of what you know and like, and then they turn it. And next thing you know, you're doing something that you don't even agree with. But there was a drop, there was a mustard seed of something that you also that you liked, right? But they used it, they manipulated it. And so I would just really push and challenge and caution those of us who believe that parents exercising and having opportunities and access to a variety of ways to that fit their children, that we do not be tricked into signing on to things that undermine the very vision that we have for free children. And that is particularly in the structures. What's the good of having an independent Black school where I can't teach independent Black thought?
That's right.
To me, that's the dumbest thing. Or you know what I mean? Like, let me just paint.
That's not an independent Black school.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. But there are people who will think that they have that, just like there are people who will get in proximity in the wrong spaces and think they have access to freedom. No, you don't. You're actually less free than that renegade over there.
Well,
I'll give my final thought, and then back to you, David, and let you give your synopsis of all of this, right?
All right.
So, because you're the esteemed guest here, I'm just gonna say at the end of this, I think we agree mostly on the need for Black self-determination, and it's always just a matter of how do we get there, and what's the method, what's the theory of how we get there. So we're sharing the goal. The goal is absolute. It's crystal clear for all of us. We need to determine the who, what, when, where, and how of the intellectual development of our young people, and until we have that, we're not free. So we can talk about freedom and liberatory, everything else in the world, but until we have the complete control over the intellectual development of the Black child, we are still not free. So let's just start there. We agree on that. In terms of everything that I just heard, we have to realize that, like, in our own history, there are these models, mental models for me, that help us understand the current times. So when you were trying to get people out of slavery, sharecropping was a better step than slavery. And when you were trying to get people out of sharecropping, migrating to the industrial North was better than sharecropping. And when you got to the North, it wasn't all milk and honey there either. Once you got there, you had wage slavery, and you were at the bottom of the union rung in every job, and at the bottom, but at least you could make a little bit of a life or whatnot, right? And then you started moving up into some higher jobs or whatnot. And in each level of those, it wasn't total freedom. It was just better than the last thing that you were in, right? And then the bottom fell out in the North for lots of us. The industrial bottom fell out of industrialized cities like Gary and Milwaukee and these other places. I'm only bringing this up to say, at every juncture, we're offered this freedom, this route to freedom. And then when we get there, it's not the freedom that we wanted it to be. Always. It's not always the shiny thing. In terms of school choice, I think that public school choice actually is a place where we have a lot of power and a stronghold in already. We have Black people with infrastructure and charters, and even in district schools, and even people like Sonia Santelius and who are running systems where we have some degree of power to be able to determine some things in public school choice. It just needs to be 1,000 times better than it is right now. When it comes to private school choice, to me, that's always been one of the big goals. Like I was about to say the Valhalla, but that's not very African. Anyways, it's always been private school choice has been the place where we could build independent Black schools. But what I'm starting to see is the emergence of, we won't have the infrastructure there. The same people who are trying to be our sojourner truths to get us there are people that will get us there and then mug us. There won't be any infrastructure there. And they'll be putting us in white-themed private schools, which is all there is right now, because we had Black independent schools at one point. They didn't come running for us then. The Hillsdales of the world or whatnot. And those will just be re-education centers for small groups of Black people so that they can crank out more, Candace Owens and Herschel Walkers of the world. And that actually, to me, is not a good program. I would love to see a program for how we have Black capital that goes before we get there, to start building schools of our own making and our own choosing. That would be school choice. School choice wouldn't be giving us a coupon to schools that don't exist yet, and then having us go there and having them say, oh yeah, we have this fine array of white supremacist schools that you can go to that are going to be totally better than those district schools where you at least have some Black teachers, Black superintendents, Black school board members, and so on. Not to say that that's the end all be all, but I'm just saying, you got to be careful sometimes of what people are offering you on your road to freedom, because history has taught us to be skeptical. Anyways, that's my final word. So, David Hardy, this was supposed to be a show about us holding our friends accountable who are attacking us in other ways, right? Like, I don't know that we got there 100%, but I did hear you say name names, and not everybody's a monolith. It's not one movement. So, call out the parts that are problematic. I feel like I'm trying to do that. Final word
I,
on you, though, brother.
yeah. Well, I appreciate being with you guys always. It's always a pleasure. And I think that what I've seen in my long life is that either side, once you get on that side, then they start to abridge your rights. And that's the left or the right. They both want to abridge your rights. And I think that the key thing to keep in mind in this is to keep your freedom. And like I said, that is controlling the money, controlling where your child goes, and looking for tangible outcomes when that happens. And if we can get school back to teaching and learning instead of fighting over where that person goes, we should be fighting over the quality of what that person receives when they go there. That's where we need to be. And we're a long ways from that. And we won't get there by having things polarize us. We need to maintain some kind of dialogue and figure this thing out because it's too important. All right. So thanks for having me, brothers. Thank you.
Appreciate you coming on a short notice, man. I really
No problem.
appreciate it. So,
Always great to
listen,
see you,
everybody
Mr.
who's
Hardy.
been watching, friends and fam, thank you for spending your morning with us on a Friday to help us liberate ourselves. This has been an hour with David Hardy, the esteemed and distinguished senior fellow at Commonwealth Foundation, also the founder and CEO, former CEO of Boys Latin of Philadelphia Charter School. So he
Twice
knows
over.
of which he talks about. So this is the power of these conversations. Both of you have directly educated Black children. You're not talking theoretically, right? Like, so what it takes. I just wish there were more of you, and I wish there was more capital for there to be more of you.
You should be the superintendent. I tried to push him.
Yeah,
He should be running these schools. This man right here.
Sharif.
He's my hero because
Oh,
I
I
know
do
he would
too.
do a good job.
Oh no, I do too, and I know he would have the right mind. And everybody loves Sharif. I mean, this is one of the things. Sharif has been able to do some pretty radical things in life with a very common sense approach and ability to work across lines of difference. That's a huge skill. Huge skill. I don't have it, but I think it's amazing. I'm not trying to get it either. But anyways,
unsheath your sword. Unsheath your sword. I appreciate both of y'all, and you guys are leading the work in so many different ways, and you give cover to folks in so many different ways, And I remember when I first met you, two similarities, and I know we have to end. Both times that when I met both of you, or when I encountered both of you, you were speaking, something so clearly, about what needs to happen. And the first time for David Hardy was actually in a meeting full of people, and there were a lot of folks are hemming and hawing, and I'm usually pretty quiet and thinking about, like, all right, well, that's they talking that. This is what I'm going to do with my team, and da da da. And Hardy stood up and just, talking about like speaking truth to power. I think it was the mayor, it was some other folks that he just like, blasted them with truth, right? Like not some made up stuff, not a lie, like truth. And the same thing, with you, Chris. And we started with Malcolm, and when I ended with Malcolm said, "Make it plain." And I think
There you go.
that's one of the things that is
Mhm.
so important that both of you bring, that you have a gift at, and that you are committed to, is making it plain. Because when you say like I'm able to navigate different spaces, you're also able to talk to that parent, that community member, that Black woman, Black man, who are like, okay, this is what I need, and being able to speak to them, as well as speak to folks who may be in these positional authorities as well, but making it plain regardless of what company that you're in at the moment. So just shout out to y'all, and shout out to Malcolm and what he told us to do. Make things plain, stop, and particularly in education, where folks just love to complicate, pontificate, and talk bullshit. So I
Hmm.
appreciate y'all. You know, we got to be sucker
Yeah.
free, and you two will represent being sucker free. You know what I mean? So
I
good stuff.
appreciate that as a place to stop because, on Twitter, I believe that that's every tweet of mine is an attempt to make things plain and not mysterious, right?
Mhm.
It's an attempt to cut straight to the chase. Stop all the fluffy. You only got 100 and something characters, right? 250 characters,
Mhm.
something like that. Make it as plain as possible. Cut straight to the. You racist.
Call it what it
Just
is.
call it
Yeah.
what it is. Just like
Yeah.
call it when you see it. So, anyways, I appreciate and have such respect for both of you. I knew that we could have this conversation in a way that would be useful for others. For the people listening and watching, this has been another episode of Freedom Friday, and you are still not free, but hopefully you're just a little bit freer for having this hour with us. We will see you again next week with what I'm sure will be a riveting conversation. So share the show with friends and come back next week. Share that show with friends also, and let's build a movement around good conversation that liberates the 8 million Black children in America that are walking into schools every day that aren't ready to help them reach their highest potential. We appreciate you. As